Picture this. A single man's army swept across the known world like a plague, leaving behind a trail of destruction, so vast that the forest grew back over. Abandoned cities. 40 million people, 10% of the entire human population, dead. The carbon dioxide in Earth's atmosphere measurably dropped as farmland returned to wilderness. This wasn't a natural disaster. This was one man's vision of empire, Genghis Khan. The name that still echoes through history as both brilliant conqueror and architect of apocalypse. How did a homeless orphan from the Mongolian steppes become the deadliest human being who ever lived? And what drove him to unleash such calculated devastation? The year is 1206. In the windswept grasslands of Mongolia, a place the civilized world considered the edge of nowhere. While Europe built cathedrals and China refined its bureaucracy, the Mongol tribes lived as they had for centuries. Nomadic herders locked in endless cycles of raids, alliances, and betrayals. These were not unified people. They were fractured clans, the Merkits, Naimans, Tatars, Khorites, each considering the other's enemies. Competition for scarce grazing lands and livestock. Into this world of constant warfare, a boy named Temujin was born around 1162. His father, Yasuge, was a minor chieftain poisoned by rivals when Temujin was only 9 years old. Overnight, his family fell from meager privilege to absolute destitution. His father's followers abandoned them. His mother, Holin, kept her children alive by foraging for roots and catching fish with bare hands. Temujin knew starvation. He knew humiliation. When he killed his own half-brother over a stolen bird, he learned another lesson. Survival required ruthlessness. But Temujin possessed something beyond brutality. He had strategic genius and an almost supernatural ability to inspire loyalty. Through calculated marriages, military brilliance, and a meritocratic approach revolutionary for his time, he began uniting the Mongol tribes. By 1206, at a gathering called a Kurultai near the Onun River, the tribal leaders proclaimed him Genghis Khan, universal ruler. At this moment, Genghis commanded approximately 100,000 mounted warriors. The Mongol army wasn't the largest in the world, but it was the most mobile, disciplined, and tactically sophisticated fighting force on the planet. Each warrior trained from childhood capable of shooting arrows accurately while galloping at full speed. They could survive on almost nothing drinking horse, blood and mare's milk when necessary. Their horses, though small, could travel up to 100 miles per day. Genghis Khan looked beyond the steppes. To the south lay the Jin dynasty of northern China, with a population exceeding 50 million. To the west, the wealthy Khwarazmian Empire stretched across Persia and Central Asia. To the east, the wealthy kingdoms of the Silk Road. These civilizations viewed the Mongols as barbarians, savages unworthy of respect. That contempt would cost them everything. Because Genghis Khan wasn't simply building an empire, he was engineering a system of conquest that would reshape the world map, and in the process, extinguish more human lives than any conflict before the 20th century. Genghis Khan's first major target was the Jin dynasty, which controlled northern China and the resource-rich lands below the Gobi Desert. The Jin military numbered approximately 600,000 soldiers, 6 times the size of the Mongol army. They defended their territory with advanced siege technology, crossbows, armored infantry, and fortified cities with walls 30 feet high. On paper, the Mongols should have been crushed, but Genghis understood something his enemies did not. War was evolving. Traditional armies fought for glory, seasonal campaigns, territorial gains measured in miles. Genghis fought for annihilation. His strategy rested on 3 pillars: speed, psychological warfare, and total intelligence dominance. The Mongol army operated unlike any force in history. They traveled light without supply trains. Each warrior brought multiple horses, rotating mounts to maintain incredible speed. They could cover distances in days that took conventional armies weeks. When they approached enemy territory, they didn't simply attack. They gathered intelligence through an elaborate spy network of merchants, deserters, and captured prisoners subjected to interrogation. Genghis employed terror as deliberate strategy. Before engaging major cities, Mongol envoys would offer terms: submit completely, pay tribute, provide soldiers for the Mongol army, or face total destruction. Cities that surrendered were often spared, their populations integrated into the growing empire. Cities that resisted received no mercy. The siege tactics were methodical. Mongols adapted rapidly, capturing Chinese engineers and forcing them to construct siege equipment, catapults, battering rams, incendiary devices. They would divert rivers to flood cities or cut off water supplies. They drove captured civilians ahead of their armies as human shields, forcing defenders to slaughter their own people or allow Mongol approach. Between 1211 and 1234, the Jin dynasty slowly collapsed. City after city fell. Beijing was besieged, its population starving before finally capitulating. Historians estimate that northern China's population dropped from approximately 60 million to roughly 40 million during this period. 20 million dead from combat, starvation, and disease in just over 2 decades. But the Jin campaign was merely preparation. In 1218, a pivotal incident occurred that would unleash the most devastating phase of Mongol conquest. Genghis Khan sent a trade caravan of 500 merchants to the Khwarazmian Empire, seeking peaceful commercial relations. The governor of the border city of Otrar, a man named Inalchuk, accused the merchants of being spies and executed them, seizing their goods. Genghis sent ambassadors demanding justice. The Khwarazmian Shah Muhammad executed one ambassador and sent the others back with their beards burned off, a profound insult in Mongol culture. Genghis Khan had built an empire through calculated pragmatism. He preferred submission to bloodshed when possible. But this insult demanded response. He assembled an army of approximately 150,000 warriors and turned west. What followed would be the most comprehensive military destruction in medieval history. The Khwarazmian Empire in 1219 was among the wealthiest powers on Earth, stretching from modern-day Iran through Central Asia to Afghanistan. It controlled crucial Silk Road cities: Bukhara, Samarkand, Urgench. Mir Shah Muhammad commanded an army estimated at 400,000 soldiers. His empire was rich, fortified, and seemingly impregnable behind mountain passes and river defenses. Genghis Khan divided his forces with surgical precision. He sent his best generals, Jebe and Subutai, with 30,000 warriors on a sweeping, flanking maneuver, riding thousands of miles around the Khwarazmian defensive positions. Meanwhile, Genghis led the main force through the supposedly impassable Kazilkum Desert, appearing where the enemy thought no army could travel. The psychological impact was immediate. Shah Muhammad had dispersed his forces across fortified cities, expecting conventional siege warfare. Instead, Mongol armies appeared simultaneously across his empire, moving faster than messengers could carry warnings. Panic spread like wildfire. The city of Otrar, where the merchants had been murdered, fell after a 5-month siege. Inalchuk, the governor responsible for the initial insult, was captured alive. Genghis Khan ordered molten silver poured into his eyes and ears, both symbolic of the gold he had stolen and a message about greed's consequences. Every soldier in the garrison was executed. The civilian population was enslaved or massacred, but Otrar was just the beginning. In February 1220, Mongol forces reached Bukhara, one of Islam's great cultural centers, home to magnificent libraries and architectural wonders. The city's garrison attempted a breakout and was slaughtered. When the remaining defenders surrendered, Genghis Khan entered the Great Mosque and declared it stables for his horses, a calculated humiliation of Islamic sacred space. The city's scholars, artisans, and young people were separated. Skilled craftsmen were sent to Mongolia. Young men were conscripted into Mongol labor battalions, driven ahead of armies as human shields in future sieges. The remaining population faced systematic execution. Contemporary Persian historian Juvayni wrote that the Mongols came. They sapped, they burnt, they slew, they plundered, and they departed. The great libraries burned. Centuries of accumulated knowledge turned to ash. Samarkand fell next in March 1220. This city, even more magnificent than Bukhara, housed approximately 100,000 people. After a brief siege, Mongol forces breached the walls. 30,000 garrison soldiers attempted a last stand and were annihilated. The civilian population was ordered to evacuate to the plains outside the city. There, Mongol soldiers methodically divided them, craftsmen to one side, women and children to another, remaining men to a third group. What happened next exemplified Mongol psychological warfare. Each Mongol soldier was reportedly assigned a quota of citizens to execute, sometimes 24 per soldier. The executions were carried out systematically over several days. Survivors were forbidden to bury the dead, leaving fields of corpses as warnings to other cities. Estimates suggest 50,000 civilians died at Samarkand alone. The capital, Urgench, held out the longest, defended by the Shah's mother, Turkan Khatun. The siege lasted 6 months. When the city finally fell in April 1221, the Mongols diverted the Amudarya River through the city, quite literally washing it from the map. The death toll reached an estimated 100,000. Shah Muhammad fled before the Mongol advance, pursued relentlessly by Jebi and Subutai. He died on an island in the Caspian Sea in 1220, possibly from pleurisy, broken and defeated. His son Jalal al-Din proved a more capable military commander, actually defeating a Mongol force at the Battle of Parwan in 1221, one of the few commanders ever to achieve this feat. But Genghis Khan personally took the field against Jalal al-Din at the Battle of the Indus River in November 1221. The Khwarazmian prince fought brilliantly, but was outmaneuvered and outnumbered. As his army collapsed, Jalal al-Din performed a legendary feat, spurring his horse over a cliff into the Indus River and swimming to safety, while Mongol arrows fell around him. Genghis Khan reportedly expressed admiration for his courage, ordering his men not to pursue. Jalal al-Din survived, but his army was destroyed. The city of Merv, known as the Pearl of the East, met perhaps the cruelest fate. When it fell in February 1221, the Mongols promised the population mercy if they surrendered. Over 700,000 people reportedly evacuated to the plains. There, they were divided by occupation. Craftsmen were spared. 400 artisan families were sent to Mongolia. Everyone else, approximately 700,000 men, women, and children, was systematically executed over 13 days. The survivors were specifically the soldiers assigned to count and report the dead. Historians debate these numbers, but even conservative estimates place the death toll above 300,000. The Mongol invasion of the Khwarazmian Empire lasted approximately 2 years, from 1219 to 1221. When it ended, one of the world's richest civilizations had ceased to exist. Its cities lay in ruins. Its population was reduced by an estimated 90% in some regions. The Persian historian Juzjani wrote that, in the Muslim countries devastated by him, there did not remain in the vicinity of the towns, and in the cultivated districts more than 1 out of 100, or at most 1 out of 1,000. The Mongols moved on. Korea, Russia, Eastern Europe, each felt the storm. Between 1206 and Genghis Khan's death in 1227, his armies conquered territory containing approximately 100 million people. Modern demographic studies estimate that 37 to 40 million died as direct and indirect results of Mongol conquests, starvation, disease, destruction of agricultural infrastructure, and outright massacre. Genghis Khan died in August 1227, possibly from injuries sustained falling from his horse, though the exact circumstances remain unclear. His empire at that moment stretched from Korea to Eastern Europe, the largest contiguous land empire in human history. His descendants would continue conquering for another 50 years, reaching as far as Vienna, Baghdad, and the borders of Japan. But the cost was almost incomprehensible. 40 million people, roughly 10% of the world's population at the time, died during the Mongol conquests. Entire civilizations were erased. The devastation was so complete in some regions that forests reclaimed farmland, and scientists have detected a measurable drop in atmospheric carbon dioxide during this period as human agricultural activity collapsed across vast territories. Yet history's judgment on Genghis Khan remains complex. His empire facilitated the Silk Road's greatest flourishing, connecting East and West in unprecedented trade and cultural exchange. The Pax Mongolica, Mongol peace, meant that for a century, merchants could travel from China to Europe under single imperial protection. Technologies, ideas, and goods flowed freely. Paper money, gunpowder, printing, and compass technology spread to Europe through Mongol intermediaries. Genghis Khan implemented religious tolerance, meritocratic promotion, written legal codes, and diplomatic immunity concepts that were revolutionary for the 13th century. Within his empire, he protected merchants, established relay stations for rapid communication, and created administrative systems that managed diverse populations across incomprehensible distances. The genetic legacy is staggering. Recent genetic studies suggest that approximately 16 million men alive today, about 0.5% of the male population, carry Y chromosome lineages traceable to Genghis Khan and his close male relatives. His biological impact on human genetics is measurable 8 centuries later. But for the civilizations that resisted, the legacy is one of pure devastation. The Islamic Golden Age, which had produced breakthroughs in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy, never fully recovered from Mongol destruction of cities like Baghdad, Bukhara, and Samarkand. Libraries representing centuries of accumulated knowledge burned. Irrigation systems were destroyed and never rebuilt. Population levels in some regions didn't recover for centuries. Genghis Khan remains the most successful conqueror in human history, and simultaneously, its single deadliest individual. He demonstrated that with sufficient organization, mobility, and ruthlessness, a relatively small force could topple civilizations. And he proved that terror, when applied systematically and without mercy, could become the ultimate weapon. The historical accounts of Genghis Khan's conquest come from both Mongol and conquered peoples' perspectives. The primary Mongol source is The Secret History of the Mongols, written shortly after Genghis Khan's death, which provides invaluable insight into Mongol culture and Genghis's early life. Persian historians Atamalik Juvaini and Rashid al-Din documented the devastation from the conquered people's perspectives, providing detailed accounts of city-by-city destruction, though their casualty figures are sometimes debated by modern scholars. Contemporary demographic research by historians including John Mann, Jack Weatherford in Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World, and scholarly analyses from institutions like Cambridge University Press have attempted to calculate realistic death tolls by examining tax records, population estimates, and archaeological evidence from the period. The 40 million figure represents consensus estimates accounting for direct military deaths, famine resulting from destroyed agricultural infrastructure, disease spread by displaced populations, and cascading effects of societal collapse. According to research published by the Carnegie Institution's Department of Global Ecology, the depopulation was so severe that it constitutes one of the few instances in human history where warfare had measurable impact on global carbon cycles, reforestation, of approximately 700 million tons of carbon was absorbed from the atmosphere as abandoned farmlands returned to wilderness. If you found this exploration of history's most devastating conqueror fascinating, there's much more to discover about the Mongol Empire's lasting impact. The story of Genghis Khan's grandsons, particularly Kublai Khan's transformation of China and Hulagu Khan's destruction of Baghdad, reveals how this nomadic people reshaped civilizations across 3 continents. The Mongol conquest changed not just territorial boundaries, but the fundamental trajectory of world history, connecting East and West in ways that still influence our modern world. History isn't just dates and battles, it's the story of how individual decisions ripple through centuries, how ambition can reshape continents, and how the consequences of violence echo across generations. Genghis Khan understood power in its rawest form and wielded it with a thoroughness that still stuns us 8 centuries later. 10% of humanity paid the price for one man's vision of universal empire. The question that haunts us: was the world that emerged from the ashes worth the apocalyptic cost?